welcome to episode 2 of Class A vodcast where we will be discussing culturally and linguistically diverse Mayan students in our Palm Beach County schools. I'm Christy Aliaga, an ESOL instructional specialist with the Department of Multicultural. And today I have with me Miss Jody Nolf, an ESOL coordinator from Jupiter Middle School. Hi, Jody. Thanks for joining me. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role at Jupiter Middle School?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me for this presentation today. I am an ESOL coordinator in a middle school in the north end of the county in Jupiter. We have a large, diverse Mayan population. I'm actually the first ESOL coordinator that Jupiter Middle has ever had. So we have started an entirely new program working with this very rich and wonderfully diverse population.
Honored to be here today talking with the Dr. Melvin Bustamante, Assistant Principal at Boca Raton High School. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. My name is, as you mentioned, Dr. Melvin Bustamante. I am originally from Guatemala. I came to the United States at the age of 15. And I'm currently working as an assistant principal at Boca Raton High School. I've been here for 10 years. So I came out of the educational field into teaching, and it's been the most amazing part of my life so far. And I think I can go back 10 years and say, this is the best decision I ever made professionally. So it's been a pleasure.
That is exciting. And your background and your story is what I'm so excited to dive right into. So let's get started. Jody, let's get right to the first question. So how does your leadership journey or your own personal story inspire the work you do for successful outcomes with your ELs, particularly the culturally and linguistically diverse Mayan population?
That's a really great question. And reflecting on my life and my journey to this point, I think I've always just had a love of culture. I like to say culture colors our world. I've always had an affinity for languages. I began my educational journey as an English teacher. I've always loved the command of language, and just the idea of speaking multiple languages has always appealed to me. And as far as cultures go, I've always really had a soft spot for children of other cultures, of people in this country who may have been marginalized. My own personal background, while I am a native English speaker, my own culture has been discriminated against in various populations. So I do know what it feels like to feel like, quote unquote, the other. And I never really understood why. And perhaps that also has been part of my journey, the seeking answers as to why we choose to marginalize and discriminate against certain groups when these groups, especially our Mayan speakers, have such rich backgrounds and such a wealth of knowledge. Our own multicultural department and our Mayan team has taught me and many other coordinators so much about the culture. It's astounding how much they have enriched American culture and cultures around the world that we may not have even have known about. What they have brought to the table in terms of their knowledge has fascinated me. And I just look to always learn more, and we could always learn more through our students.
Absolutely. You're right. That diversity and that richness is so important for us to really understand. To not only be aware, but to understand it so that we can be more culturally responsive as we are teaching them. I love your story. Thanks, Jody. So Dr. Bustamante, let's jump right into your background, a little bit about your leadership journey and personal story and how that inspires the work you do that leads to successful outcomes for the ELs, particularly the culturally and linguistically diverse Mayan students that you have at your school?
Perfect. Absolutely. So I can tell you that education was the last thing in my mind when I was in school. I happened to come from a family that was educational driven, but circumstances happened in my life that unfortunately my parents passed away when I was in high school. And not knowing the language, not knowing the system, not knowing who to go to for help, for assistance, that alone was a problem in itself. So one of the things I really had to learn later as a leader now is that language shouldn't be a barrier for many of the students to succeed. And I wish I would have had that voice when I was younger, and I would have had the motivation and the confidence to say and to be an advocate for myself, for other students. So I think nowadays one of the most important things is, creating a support system for many of our students that don't have it. And I can go back and look at it and into my own experiences. I worked so many different jobs, and education has been a blessing in my life. And being able to make a difference with the kids that I see now. One of the things that I always say students, to students that don't know language, don't know English, for example, I always say, listen, you know what you need to do, but you need to get better at language. That shouldn't be a barrier for you to say, I'm going to give up. I don't want to do it. I am originally a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school in 11th grade, going into 12th grade, because I didn't have the support system and I didn't know the language at that time. I was an ESOL student all my life. Even today, I'm still learning English. So I want to use my experiences to help kids that they feel they don't have an opportunity to succeed in the classes, or when they go into a place and they don't feel confident because they don't understand 100% what is being said. I want them to feel that language shouldn't be a barrier. Language should be an asset, in them having or speaking multiple languages should be something that they should be proud of.
I knew a little bit about your story, but I didn't know your whole story, even though I'm sure that wasn't all of it. But what you've shared is just so inspiring. And what I love the most is that you've taken those challenges that you had yourself and you're applying that to how to help your students as an assistant principal. And so thank you for that. And wow, how motivational you can be when you tell that story to your own students in high school and create that support system to show them you're all in for them. That's wonderful.
I appreciate it. And that's one of the things, I went to school in Miami. I went to school in Guatemala. So I've been very fortunate to have a diverse, view of what education looks like in different areas. And that's what I try to tell the students. Listen, it's a moment in time. You can do it. You got to keep pushing forward.
To our next question, Jody. Lately, especially during this COVID-19 era, many people question and seek new ways to engage students. We've had to get very innovating as educators. And I'm just wondering, what do you think works best when engaging our culturally and linguistically diverse Mayan students in our classrooms?
That's a really interesting question, but I like to keep it very simple. As someone who is pretty recently out of the classroom, and I like to be very realistic, I feel that what has really hooked many of our students has been the games. I have to say it's been the games. They love Kahoot, they love quizzes, they love things that are engaging. And while we are virtual and cannot always be hands-on for the students who are learning at home, they can still be engaged in a sort of hands-on environment without actually having to manipulate, for example, a smartboard. So I think games are a great way to engage students. I also think that pictures are vital. I had a question just the other day from another ESL teacher saying, what is the best way to reach newcomers? And I said, start simple. Start with pictures, just like when we were beginning to learn as very young children in kindergarten. Our teachers labeled the classroom because teachers were able to use pictures so that students could assimilate. Another way to really reach our Mayan learners is through the personal touch, really any learner. We are finding that if we are able to reach parents directly, that loving touch, that personal touch has been monumental in getting their kids on board. It has been challenging, but not impossible. And we have found that when parents are contacted directly, they are so appreciative because they feel important, they feel included, and they know they feel welcomed in our schools.
You know, Jody, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. That family home connection is paramount. And that's when our families and our students will work the best for us, right? The most, they'll give us all they got because they know just how much we care about them and their family. You're absolutely right. And you know what? I couldn't agree with you more about the games. You're right. Engaging those kiddos so that, you know, every few minutes they have an opportunity to engage with us on a platform is so important. I love everything that you're thinking about for our Mayan students.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Communication to me is the number one aspect that we need to consider in order to maintain engagement in the classroom and outside the classroom. The disconnect that some of these parents and the students feel with the school, that can be a deal breaker for them in their success to high school. So I have always made it my goal that I have to build the relationships with the students, with the parents, with other people in the community that can assist us. And when it comes to teachers, I want to make sure that they understand that, you know, our students want to learn. Our students are not in the classroom to get an A for free. You know, they want to learn, but they need the teachers to be that light at the end of the tunnel, right? So we need our teachers to be more engaging. And they, you know, I always say use the small groups, communicate with the parents. If you need assistance, please let me know. I'm more than willing to help. But I always say build that communication channel. That's going to be the lifesaver for the students, not for you or for the parents, for the students. Because at the end of the day, I say our main goal should be the students. How can we surround our students with resources so they don't feel alone, they don't feel disconnected, they don't feel valued, they don't feel welcome, they don't feel loved, right? And a lot of the students respond very well because I always try to do an introduction. If I bring a new student on campus that are registered, I usually walk them around campus, and if I speak Spanish and they speak Spanish, that's for me, that's a winner automatically, because now they feel like you look like me maybe, and you sound like me, maybe I can do this, right? And a lot of the times I tell them all the time, listen, don't let the tie fool you. Don't let the suspenders fool you. I was in your shoes at one point in my life, you know, and the main goal is to surround yourself, to take a chance. If you just go into the classroom and you don't want to be part of it, you don't want to contribute, you're only damaging yourself. I tell that to the students, and they're like, well, I feel disconnected. They don't like me. Forget about that. You got to do you. And as soon as I'm here, you're going to have me as a support system, you know? So, and the other thing is our teachers need to be told and to be taught and be aware that a lot of the students come with baggage, you know, even though it sounds like a negative thing, everybody comes with different issues to school. And many of the students are like, maybe they didn't have breakfast that day. Maybe they didn't have the supplies to do the work, you know, and a lot of the times, unfortunately, the divorce statistics are going through a roof, and many of our students, they're going through that, you know. So the other issue is the money. That's the big thing, the money. Some of our students have to work, and I was in their shoes. I had to work until midnight. So I tell the students, listen, when they tell me I've been working all night, I get it. I was there. And sometimes I share a little bit of my life with them, you know, delivering newspapers at 2 a.m, working at a meat packing factory, working at Avis Rent a Car. I tell them all the time, I know what you're going through. So in order to maintain those high levels of engagement in the classroom, we have to like not pretend that we know more, simply kind of lower ourselves a little bit so we can bring them up, right? And I tell the teachers, don't water down the content. Don't do that. They can do it, but they need you to be that positive influence. So it's a full circle, right? It's not just I do this, you do that. No, we all have to work together. And when you can't reach that student because of X, Y, and Z, don't worry. Tell me, and I'll find how to reach out to the kid, or I can find somebody else to do it because I don't have all the answers either. I got to be honest with myself. And I sometimes I wish I had $1 million. And oh, you couldn't eat? Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, you need this? There you go. But I don't. And all I can do is kind of motivate him to continue pushing forward.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It goes back to those basic needs and making sure those are met, because we aren't going to engage our students with anything we put in front of them until we make sure that they do feel loved. They feel like they have us in their corner. And what I'm hearing you say is that communication and resources, that couldn't be more important. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we have to make sure that our teachers know that. They know what resources are available within the school or within the district, because a lot of the times they have 200 kids. And I understand that they're not going to stop every single minute to say, Johnny, this, and that. And that's where we come in. If they don't know what the resources are, we can get them for them. So we
and
have
those are always changing, those resources, right? They're always changing, especially when we have new teachers come in. So it sounds like you do a really good job at making sure your teachers are aware of what the resources are and know what you called it, baggage and challenges and just things that those kids are up against every day, making sure they're really aware of that, because you understand, because you've walked in their shoes. But some of those teachers haven't. And so it sounds like, making sure that we have a balance between helping our teachers as much as we're helping our students is just as important. Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Jody, so from your experiences, whether it be personal or professional, what do you think our ELs just in general need in order to be successful?
My answer might seem a little out of the ordinary. And again, it's going to be a simple answer. I think it's love. I think they are kids like any other child. We keep talking about the social emotional learning and the whole child and what they really need to thrive. Kids are kids, whether or not they are ELs, whether or not they are native English speakers, whether or not they're new to the country or started when they were in kindergarten. Children need love. They need to feel safe. They need to feel welcomed, and they need to feel loved in the environment that they are in. When I was in the classroom, and I always share this story, especially with ESL teachers who don't really feel confident as they're teaching, I tell them, I never felt that I was a great ESOL teacher. I was okay. I was a very skilled English teacher. I was rated highly effective. I never felt that I was a great ESOL teacher, but I was a nice one. The kids always loved being in my classroom. They participated. It never occurred to me that children in other ESL classes would actually not raise their hand or wouldn't participate, because I always had that. Maybe not at the level of some very advanced speakers or more confident learners, but my children were engaged, and it never occurred to me that they didn't feel that way in other classrooms. So I always try to make other ESL teachers feel very confident and more able to do their teaching by saying, look, smile, welcome them in. They will want to produce for you. They will want to engage with you. They will want to talk with you as struggling as they are, or as proficient as they are. If they feel loved like any other child in your classroom, whether they are 7 or 17, they will produce because they want to do that for you. But more importantly, they want to do it for themselves because they feel confident. And that love is what is going to give them that confidence to progress.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. You're right. With that love, they feel confident in making a mistake, failing, trying again. Especially when our population that we're discussing is learning that second language or third language, even when they're learning English, they're going to have those times where they know that they're going to try, right? And they may fail. And whether it just be communicating in English or writing or reading something, but when they know you care about them, the mistakes feel like learning experiences. So you're right. That's so important. Awesome.
Absolutely. I think that you hit it on the head when you talked about that students will feel confident even if they fail in their communication or don't get the word right, because they feel safe. They feel it is a safe place to try and to make mistakes and to build on those mistakes. And that is how we all grow, and that is how we all learn.
Even as adults. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely ongoing support. We talk about providing support to students, but is that ongoing, or is that just at the beginning of the year or the middle of the year or the holidays, right? The support has to be ongoing, and they have to trust us, and we have to build that relationship with them. And everything simmers down to human capital, right? They have to, the human capital is a huge component, and I live by it. I think that if we don't support our teachers and we don't support the parents, we are not going to get that ongoing support that we need in order to make sure that the students are succeeding in class. So, to me, relationships matter. Relationships are the key to success, part of it. And, I think from my personal experience, I understood now looking back. I didn't understand back then, but now I understood looking back that I didn't have a support system around me to say, Dr. Bustamante, you need to do this or you need to go this way. No one told me. When I dropped out of high school, no one called me to check on me. I just continued working. When I went to finally got my GD, I was very fortunate that everything was fresh in my mind. 2 years later, after I dropped out of high school, I went to get my GD. So in that time, I was just a lost soul. And I can see a lot of the times our kids, they have no direction. And sometimes talking to them 1 minute or 2 minutes a day will change their lives. And when I went to community college, no one told me what to do. I did all the paperwork by myself. I was very fortunate that I had just the idea to do it, and I did it, you know? So I can see that the support has to be there. I didn't have that support, and I always tell people, and they make fun of it when I tell them, but I always say, I always want to be that person I didn't have in school, right? I want to make sure that when the students are lost or they're feeling like they don't know where else to go or they want to stay quiet, if I see a kid out there sitting by themselves and I know there's something going on, I don't have to talk about what's going on. I have to talk about sports. We can talk about anything else. But once you make that connection, oh my God, the doors open, and you better be ready with tissues. You better be ready to get a counselor. You better be ready to get to all these systems of support that we have in place, ready and activated. It's almost like someone presses the red button, activate this system. Let's support the kid. And that's how it works. And here at Boca High, I can tell you, we're very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate to have an amazing ESOL counselor, ESOL coordinator, counselors that I work very closely with. But then I go back and I say, me building the relationship with them helps me build a relationship with the students. So it's like a chain, right? Everybody, you got to connect everybody who you can. But at the end of the day, creating a safe school environment and providing students with ongoing support, that's the key to success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And, even in high school, we have to remember that even though they're young adults, they still sometimes don't know what they need as far as support or what resources there are. So we can't just assume because they're older that they'll ask for what they need. So absolutely, I hear you on that. It takes that whole system and that whole village of that school community to help our children and support them for success. Fantastic.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that the meaningful relationships is huge. I have students from 5 years ago when I had lace gray hair coming to see me and say, Mr. Hernandez, and I say, well, it's Dr. Bustamante now, and they all want to know why. They all want to know, are you hiding or something? Like, what is it that why you change your name? And I tell them all the time. I said, listen, let me tell you a story real quick. I said, my mom never got a chance to go to school. She dropped out of school in fourth grade in Guatemala, and she always said, you have to go to school. Education is the key. My dad was the same. So when I finally decided to go for my doctorate, and I ended up getting my doctorate, I said, wait a minute, let me honor my mom, and I'm going to change my name to Bustamante from Hernandez. And I figured that would be the best.
So Jody, we've talked a lot about the lens of a teacher and being an ESL teacher and how to engage our students and show them love. But I'm interested in knowing from your lens as an ESOL coordinator, how can administrators and teachers work together for the success of our ELs?
That's a really good question. I think it's very important that the master board is strategically made. And I've learned that over my past few years as a coordinator. You can get very creative and really design a master board that is inclusive. And it's not easy to do. I understand that when you have multiple levels of ELL, when you have ESE, when you have those single classes that you need to really block out, it's a challenge. But when you have an administration that is really on board with that creativity, you can make an amazing schedule for an EL learner that might overlap with ESE needs, or an EL learner that might need a little bit of language support, but only in one content area. And I think that partnership of the administration combined with the entire ESL team, where you're going to put your collaborative support, who is going to teach your sheltered classes if you offer them, when you have the best and brightest and most willing and most loving nurturing those EL students, I think it helps create that climate of wanting to really include those ELs. Someone asked me the other day, what would be your dream schedule for your ELs? And I said, well, my dream schedule in a school is one where the entire staff fights over who gets to teach those kids versus who has to teach those kids. I want our staff fighting over them. And when administration really gets on board and promotes that welcoming and inclusive environment and creates that culture through the scheduling, I think you get a lot of teachers on board of, oh, you know what? I know I'm going to be supported. I'm going to have a great push in. I want those classes. I want the classes where I can really partner with a collaborative teacher. I want those classes where I have kids really engaged who are fun to teach because they know that they are loved and supported and have this great schedule that works for them as they're building their language. So I think that is vital for the administration and for all the teams to work together in that sort of partnership.
Yeah, that's so important. When we're touching on the master board, just making sure that our ESL teachers, contacts, and coordinators are at that table. You know, what's really important you said is that some of those kids only need language support in one specific or even two content areas. And that the only person that knows that is that contact or coordinator or the ESL teachers on your campus. So making sure that there's a seat at the table and that a lot of valid input goes into that master board will go a long way to support those kids. And absolutely right. We got to have our teachers that are the most nurturing, the most loving, the ones that want to have those kids in their classroom, making sure that they're paired with those students for success. Absolutely.
I think something else that also needs to be said is that the biggest factor that many ESL teachers find in creating that successful schedule, time. They all need time to plan with their collaborative staff, time to work with the plans to infuse those language supports, to work with those children. They all say that the biggest thing that they need is a carving out of time specifically allotted for and prioritized for those EL learners. Time is a biggie.
Yeah, something we're always up against that time, but having that time for PLCs or for grade content areas for those teachers, ESL teachers, to jump into those meetings and really have a voice and collaborate together. You're right. That's going to be for the success of all of our ELs. So. So Jody, as we finish up, what is one way in which teachers of culturally and linguistically diverse Mayan students can really ensure that these students have a voice in our classrooms and our schools?
I've found, especially being in the north end of the district, where we have a very concentrated area of Mayan speakers, that forming community partnerships has been paramount. We partner with ESOL. We partner with community organizations such as churches to get school supplies and backpacks for our children. I think that is so important because those resources, those outside community resources, working together help give them a voice. It's not just, for example, concentrated in the school or concentrated in the church or concentrated in ESOL. We all work together in the north end. We call it the Military Trail Corridor. It's Jupiter Elementary, it's Jupiter High, it's Jupiter Middle. We all work together because we share those families, and it has made a beautiful blossoming community where they feel safe, they feel welcomed, they feel they have a place to come if they need resources, even if it's just a phone call to say, how do I find out about X, Y, or Z, especially in the age of COVID? We provide those resources. We are constantly reaching out, not only to the individual families, but to the organizations to get to the families. We post things, for example, we have a JMSD in Espanol Google Classroom where we posted a notice from ESOL. We post notices from Caridad and My Clinic, anything that pertains to those communities to give those families a one-stop shop resource that in turn gives them a voice. They're not going to have a voice if they have nothing or no information to speak about. So we give them as much information as we can so they have that knowledge and that power.
Absolutely. And when you were saying everything that your school and Jupiter Elementary and high school and how you all work together, it got me thinking about, how it takes a village. And we say that, but those actionable steps that you and the other surrounding schools in the community work together to do, those actionable steps to give your students a voice matter. And so you lead the way in that area. And so we're so happy that you've partnered with all of these community organizations, and we should make sure that all of our communities are following in your footsteps. Absolutely.
One of the main things that we try to do here is creating a welcoming and positive school environment. The first thing, like even in the adult world, we always say first impressions last forever. So when kids come here and we are rude to the parents, or we are short with the parents, or we try to ignore them because we're busy doing other things, guess what? They're going to remember that moment. They're going to remember, hey, you know what? The school wasn't so welcoming. So I think that many of the times our students are very culturally passive, right? Because I come from Guatemala and I remember never saying, I have a question. Never. I took whatever they told me and I went with it. And now I look back and I say, wait a minute, I could have said this, A, B, C, and D were wrong, but because of my culture, I have to be accepting of whatever the adults are telling me. So a lot of the times we try to tell our students, listen, you have any questions for me? And they're like, oh, no, yes, you do. Look at this and ask me a question. I'm not that perfect that I gave you all you needed. Ask me a question and I help you. So the other thing that I always try to say is we have to be the voice for the voiceless. So unfortunately, Many of our students don't want to ask anything or don't want to say anything, so I'm going to do it for them. Sometimes I am going to get into an argument with a colleague, but I am going to do it because it's at the end of the day, it's for the benefit of the student. You know, a lot of the time the students don't want to get lunch or food or something because they don't have money, but they don't want to say it. And I see that they're disappointed. They're sitting in the corner. And I say, "Come here, what's going on?" Nothing. I'm like, "You want food?" And they're like, "Okay, yes." And little things like that we don't think matters much, but at the end of the day, it's the little things that make a difference in these kids' lives, right? And many of the Mayan students that we had here was the language barrier. And I have remember vividly, like it was yesterday, about a couple of years ago, we had a Guatemalan kid that he spoke Chu, and everybody thought that I did too because I'm from Guatemala. Guess what? Stereotype, right? Well, I'm like, okay, fine. I won't take it personal. I'll go with it. So I had to come in and go to Google Translate and communicate with the kid until we got the language line situated. And the kid was able to tell me like what was going on. And that was so eye-opening for me when I look back and I say, oh my God, I spoke Spanish in Miami. Everybody speaks Spanish. So I had it like a lot easier than this kid does. So this kid comes in, nobody speaks their language or their native tongue. Now we're thinking, oh my gosh, so where do we go? So I remember, that's what Dr. Bradley, she's my colleague. She's one of the assistant principals. And I always say, you always lead with your heart. You always are leading with your heart. And whenever I get to a point where I cannot move forward, Dr. Bradley, can you come and help me over, right? And she always said, listen, remember, you have to be the voice for the voiceless. So when you don't say something, I'm going to be disappointed in you. And when you don't help a kid, I'm going to ask you why you didn't do it. So I need someone to check on me to make sure that I'm helping the students as well. So I don't overlook like little things that I'm talking about. So and one of the other things that I remember is she said to me, keep in mind that titles do not matter. Whether you're an assistant principal, whether you're an ESOL coordinator, whether you are counselor or whatever, the minute the kid walks in here, you're a person and you have to be a human being to that person. Titles will come when you need to advocate for the kid. You don't go and say, oh, I'm just Mr. Bustamante. Now, if you need to use Dr. Bustamante, then you're going to use Dr. Bustamante if that's going to open the door, and so forth. So those are some of the things that I feel that we can ensure that we practice with our students so it can succeed.
Absolutely. And what I love, one thing I love that you said was that we have to make sure that they know we expect them to have questions, not just questions. No. One principal taught me when I began my career in education is to always, whether we're talking to students or adults, is to say, what questions do you have? Not do you have any questions? And it makes all the difference. It takes down that barrier. The expectation is there that there is a question waiting. And that's something that's always stuck with me, especially when I'm speaking to or for or with my ELLs. So I love to hear that you're making sure that those students are expected to have a voice. But then the next step is making sure that their voice can be used regardless of their English language level. And whether that's making sure we have the translation services or support on Google Translate or whatever, making sure that they can use their voice and that we expect it and then we'll give them the resources to do so. So amazing stuff happening at your school. Jody, it has been awesome to speak with you and to really get your perspective and how you are reaching our Mayan and all ELLs at your school. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything else that you'd like to add to share with our listeners today.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak and showcase our school and our ELs and our fabulous ESOL team. And to just remind everyone, every educator, every support teacher, that what you are doing matters, and to just love those children We are all learning. We are all growing, especially in the age of COVID. I know it's challenging. It's been challenging for me too. But if we can really keep that perspective of just loving those children, being there for them, they will grow in many different ways. Maybe not as academically as they normally would in a traditional year. Maybe their language hasn't grown as much as maybe you would have liked, but they are learning.
Well, Dr. Bustamante, I've really enjoyed my time with you today. Thank you for all your insights, your inspiration, and everything that you are doing for all students at Boca Raton High School. I wanted to give you a moment, though, if there's anything else that you want to add that we didn't get a minute to touch upon as some lasting remarks from you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to say thank you to you for taking the time to give me a small platform for me to share who I am and what I'm doing here. And again, I'm not doing this by myself. We're doing this here as a team. And hopefully if one day I become a principal or I move to some other school, I can carry that on, because we are helping a fraction of the kids here, but we know there are so many students out there that need that support system. And one thing I want to tell the kids to make sure they take a chance. Just go for it. You are going to fail. It's expected to. But guess what? If you don't fail, you're never going to know what you could have been doing, the potential, that you have. So, they're not alone. We are here for them. And we understand that they're hard workers. We just have to give them that opportunity, right? That opportunity for them to succeed in, despite their language differences or a limited language acquisition of English. There are resources out there, and all they have to do is put themselves out there, and we can help out.
Well, I want to thank you for your inspirational words there, and also just all your advocacy that you do yourself, but also inspire on your campus from your entire staff. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.